The frozen wind cut through Isaac Whitmore like a dull blade as he rode his chestnut mare through the late December snowstorm of 1878, cursing himself for venturing so far from his ranch in western Kansas, just 2 days before Christmas. The storm had come from nowhere, blanketing the plains in white and making it near impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. But he'd had no choice when 3 of his cattle had broken through a fence and wandered toward the creek. Now, with the temperature dropping faster than the sun behind the thick clouds, he worried he might not make it back to his homestead before nightfall turned this dangerous situation deadly. Isaac was a man of 32 years, hardened by 8 seasons of working the land alone after his father passed from pneumonia, and his mother followed 6 months later from what the doctor called a broken heart. His younger brother had headed to California with dreams of gold, leaving Isaac to manage the 200 acres their family had claimed when Kansas opened for settlement. The loneliness had become a constant companion, as familiar as the calluses on his hands or the ache in his lower back after a long day's work. The cattle tracks had long since disappeared under fresh snow, and Isaac was about to turn back when something dark caught his eye against the white landscape. At first, he thought it might be one of his missing cows, but as he urged his horse closer, his heart seized in his chest. It was a person, a woman by the looks of the dark blue dress visible beneath a thin wool coat, collapsed face down in the snow near a cluster of cottonwood trees. Her long dark hair spread around her head like a halo, already dusted white with fresh snowfall. Isaac leaped from his horse, his boots sinking deep into the drift as he stumbled toward her. He turned her over gently, his rough hands shaking as he brushed snow from her pale face. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with delicate features that looked almost peaceful despite her dire circumstances. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge, and her skin felt like ice beneath his fingers as he checked her neck for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady, and relief flooded through him so powerfully he nearly wept. There was no time to wonder how she'd come to be out here alone or where she'd come from. The nearest town of Salina was 15 miles east, and his ranch was the only homestead for miles in any direction. Isaac wrapped his heavy coat around her still form, lifting her as carefully as he could. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her bones through the thin layers of clothing. How long had she been out here? Hours? Days? He settled her across his saddle, climbing up behind her and cradling her against his chest as he turned his mare toward home. The wind fought him every step of the way, howling across the plains like a living thing determined to claim them both. Isaac talked to his horse, to the unconscious woman, to God, to anyone who might be listening, promising everything he could think of if they could just make it back alive. The ride took over an hour, though it felt like days. By the time the dark outline of his barn emerged from the white curtain of snow, Isaac's arms were numb and his face burned from the cold. He rode straight to the house, a modest 2-story structure his father had built with timber hauled from the Republican River. His hands fumbled with the door latch, nearly dropping the woman as he shouldered it open and stumbled into the blessed relief of shelter. The fire in the main room had burned down to embers, but the house still held enough warmth to make the difference between life and death. Isaac laid the woman on the worn sofa near the fireplace, his frozen fingers struggling to work as he built up the fire. Once flames were licking hungrily at fresh logs, he turned his attention back to her. Her clothes were soaked through, frozen in places, and he knew he had to get her warm and dry. Isaac had never undressed a woman before, had barely spoken to one outside of necessary transactions in town, but modesty meant nothing in the face of death. He worked quickly, averting his eyes as much as possible, stripping away the wet layers and wrapping her in every blanket he owned. Her feet were the worst, white and hard as marble, and he feared she might lose toes or worse. He heated water on the stove, filling his mother's old copper basin, testing the temperature carefully before beginning to warm her extremities. Too hot too fast could cause more damage. He remembered that much from when a ranch hand had gotten frostbite years ago. Slowly, gradually, he worked to bring warmth back into her frozen limbs, rubbing her hands and feet gently, watching for any sign of returning color. Hours passed. Isaac heated broth from the venison he'd cooked 2 days prior, managing to get small spoonfuls past her lips even though she remained unconscious. He talked to her, rambling about nothing and everything, his own voice strange in the house that had been silent except for his own thoughts for so long. He told her about his cattle, about the storm, about how he'd almost turned back, about how finding her might be the only good thing that had happened to him in years. Night fell completely, and still she didn't wake. Isaac pulled a chair beside the sofa, unable to leave her side. He dozed fitfully, jerking awake every few minutes to check that she was still breathing, that the fire hadn't died, that this wasn't all some strange dream born of loneliness and isolation. It was just before dawn when her eyes finally opened. Isaac had been staring into the fire, lost in thought, when he heard a small sound. He turned to find her looking at him with eyes the color of spring leaves, confused and afraid. "You're safe," he said quickly, his voice rough from disuse and emotion. "You're in my home. I found you in the snow. You nearly froze to death." She blinked slowly, her gaze moving around the room before returning to his face. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Isaac reached for the water he'd kept near the fire, helping her lift her head to take small sips. She winced as she swallowed, and he could see her struggling to make her voice work. "Where?" she finally managed, the single word barely more than a whisper. "My ranch, about 15 miles west of Salina, Kansas," Isaac said. "I'm Isaac Whitmore. What's your name? How did you end up out there?" Her brow furrowed, confusion and something like panic crossing her features. "I don't know," she said, her voice strengthening slightly. "I don't remember. I don't know how I got there." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her pale cheeks. "I don't remember anything." Isaac felt his chest tighten with a mixture of concern and something else he couldn't quite name. "It's all right," he said, though he wasn't sure it was. "You hit your head pretty hard, might have happened when you fell. There's a bump here." He gestured to the side of her head without touching her. Memory might come back with time. She closed her eyes, more tears escaping. "I don't even know my own name." "Don't force it," Isaac said gently. "Right now you need to rest and heal. Everything else can wait." She opened her eyes again, studying him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same. But you did it." Her hand emerged from the blankets, reaching toward him. Isaac hesitated only a moment before taking it, her fingers still cold but no longer icy. "Thank you." The next few days passed in a blur of care and cautious conversation. The woman's memory remained frustratingly absent, though her physical condition improved steadily. The frostbite on her toes was less severe than Isaac had feared, and color returned to her extremities. She was weak, hardly able to stand at first, but determination showed in every attempt she made to recover. On the third day, as Isaac helped her walk from the sofa to the kitchen table, she suddenly stopped. "Emma," she said. "I think my name is Emma." Isaac smiled, the expression feeling strange on his face after so long. "Emma, that's a good name." "Emma," she repeated, then shook her head. "I can't remember anything else. Not where I'm from, not my family, nothing. Just Emma." "Emma's enough for now," Isaac assured her, As the days turned into a week, Emma grew stronger, insisting on helping around the house despite Isaac's protests. She couldn't remember her past, but her hands seemed to know how to cook, how to mend, how to care for a home. She moved through his kitchen with a grace that suggested she'd run a household before, and Isaac found himself looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't in years. They talked while they worked, sharing the present since Emma had no past to share. Isaac found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone, about the loneliness of the ranch, about his dreams of expanding his herd, about the brother who'd abandoned their family legacy for dreams of gold. Emma listened with an attention that made him feel truly heard for the first time in his life. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Emma turned to him with serious eyes. "I should leave," she said quietly. "Somewhere out there, I might have a family looking for me, a husband, perhaps. Children." The words hit Isaac like a physical blow, though he kept his face neutral. "You don't know that." "I don't know anything," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "That's the problem. You've been so kind, Isaac, but I can't stay here forever living off your charity." "It's not charity," he said, more forcefully than he intended. "You nearly died. I'm not going to send you back out into the winter when you don't even know where you'd be going. The storm's passed. I could go into Salina, ask around. Someone might know me. And if no one does? If you're from somewhere else entirely, how did you even get out here, Emma? There are no settlements between here and Salina except my ranch. No roads, no trails that anyone would follow in winter. It doesn't make sense." Emma wrapped her arms around herself, staring into the fire. "None of it makes sense. Sometimes I feel like I'm reaching for something just beyond my grasp, a memory or a feeling, but it slips away before I can catch it." Isaac moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Then stay," he said. "At least until spring. Give your memory time to come back. Give yourself time to heal properly. Then, if you want to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go." She turned to look at him, and something passed between them in that moment, something that made Isaac's heart beat faster. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And because I haven't had anyone to talk to in so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like. You make this house feel like a home again instead of just a place to sleep between work." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I promise you something, Isaac Whitmore. However this turns out, wherever my past takes me, I'll never leave you without saying goodbye. I won't just disappear. You deserve better than that." The words should have been comforting, but they only reminded Isaac that she would leave eventually. Still, he nodded, accepting what she could offer. "That's good enough for me." Christmas came and went with quiet celebration. Isaac had little in the way of gifts, but he gave Emma a pair of warm gloves he'd purchased in town the previous winter and never worn. She gave him a scarf she'd knitted from yarn she'd found in his mother's old sewing basket, the stitches a bit uneven but made with obvious care. They shared a simple meal, and for the first time since his parents died, Isaac's house felt warm with more than just fire. January brought bitter cold but clear skies. Emma had fully recovered her strength, moving around the ranch with comfortable familiarity. She'd taken over most of the cooking and household tasks, freeing Isaac to focus on the cattle and the endless repairs that ranch life demanded. They fell into an easy rhythm, like two parts of a whole that had finally found each other. But Emma's missing memory remained a shadow over everything. Isaac would catch her staring out the window with a troubled expression, or wake in the night to hear her pacing the floor of the spare bedroom she now occupied. He wanted to help, wanted to ease her troubled mind, but he didn't know how. One morning in late January, Isaac was working in the barn when Emma came running from the house, her face alight with excitement. Isaac, I remembered something. He dropped the bridle he'd been mending and hurried to meet her. What? What did you remember? A wagon, she said breathlessly. I was in a wagon and it was so cold. There were others with me, maybe 6 or 7 people. We were traveling west, I think, and then… Her face fell, excitement giving way to confusion. And then nothing. It's gone again. Isaac took her hand, steadying her. That's something, though. That's more than you had before. Maybe you were with a wagon train. In December, Emma shook her head. That doesn't make sense. No one travels in winter if they can help it. Unless they had no choice, Isaac said thoughtfully. Or unless something went wrong with their plans and they got caught by the season. Over the following weeks, more fragments came back to Emma in dreams and sudden flashes. She remembered the sound of wheels creaking, the smell of canvas and unwashed bodies, the taste of weak coffee and hardtack. She remembered being cold, so cold for what felt like forever. But she couldn't remember faces, couldn't remember names, couldn't remember where they'd been going or why. What if they left me? She asked Isaac one night, her voice small and frightened. What if I got sick or became a burden and they just left me out there to die? Then they don't deserve to have you back, Isaac said fiercely. Anyone who would do that to another person isn't worth remembering. Emma looked at him, and Isaac saw something shift in her expression. You really mean that, don't you? You actually care what happens to me? Of course I do, Isaac said, the words coming easier than he expected. I've grown accustomed to having you here, more than accustomed if I'm being honest. Isaac, Emma began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with her words. I need to tell you something. When I woke up that first morning and saw you sitting there, I felt safe. Even though I didn't know where I was or who you were, even though I couldn't remember my own name, I looked at you and felt safe. And every day since then, that feeling has only grown stronger. Isaac's heart hammered in his chest. Emma, I don't want to take advantage. You're vulnerable right now, with your memory gone. Whatever you're feeling might just be gratitude or confusion. Don't tell me what I'm feeling, Emma said, a spark of temper showing through. I might not know where I came from, but I know my own heart. And my heart is telling me that what I feel for you is real. I've felt alone for so long, Isaac admitted, the words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. And then you came into my life and suddenly everything changed. The work doesn't feel as hard. The days don't feel as long. When I come in from the cold, I look forward to seeing your face. But Emma, what if your memory comes back and you remember a whole other life? A husband, a family? Emma moved closer to him, taking his rough, work-worn hands in hers. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, in this moment, I choose this. I choose you. I choose staying here, building a life together if you'll have me. Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close for the first time, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling the warmth of her body against his. I found you in the snow, he said, but you've brought light into my life. Emma pulled back just enough to look up at him. I'll never leave you, Isaac. No matter what happens, no matter what I remember, I'll never leave you. And then they were kissing, gentle at first and then with increasing passion, months of growing feelings finally finding expression. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it's fast, I know there are complications, but marry me anyway. Emma laughed, the sound bright and joyful. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They married in early February at the small church in Salina, with the minister and his wife serving as witnesses. Isaac had worried about explaining Emma's lack of past, but the minister, an elderly man named Reverend Thomas, simply nodded and said that the Lord worked in mysterious ways. If Isaac and Emma had found each other in the wilderness of winter, then surely that was providence enough. Emma took the last name Turner, unable to remember if she'd had another. Emma Turner. The name seemed to fit her, to suit her, and she wore it proudly as Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. Their wedding night was spent in a hotel room in Salina, the first time either of them had been truly alone with their feelings. Isaac was gentle, mindful of Emma's innocence or possible past trauma, but she came to him with an openness that suggested her body, at least, knew what to do even if her mind couldn't remember learning it. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and life took on a new rhythm. Emma threw herself into making the house a true home, sewing new curtains from fabric Isaac bought in town, planting seeds in boxes on the windowsills to get a head start on spring. Isaac worked the ranch with renewed energy, already making plans to expand, to build something worthy of the family he hoped they'd have. Spring came late that year, the snow lingering through March before finally giving way to muddy ground and the first hints of green. Emma worked beside Isaac when he'd allow it, helping to repair fences and tend to the cattle. She'd proven herself capable with horses and wasn't afraid of hard work, and Isaac marveled daily at his good fortune. But the question of Emma's past still lingered. In April, a circuit judge came through Salina, and Isaac made discreet inquiries about any wagon trains that might have passed through or gotten into trouble over the winter. The judge knew of none but promised to ask around at his other stops. May brought warmth and with it, troubling news. A man came to the ranch one afternoon, introducing himself as Marshal Theodore Grant from Denver. He was tracking a group of criminals who'd robbed a bank in Colorado and fled east with hostages. It was back in December, the marshal explained, accepting the coffee Emma offered. They took 7 people from the town, used them as shields and bargaining chips. Somewhere in Kansas, we lost their trail. The snow covered everything. We found the wagon abandoned near the Colorado border, but no sign of the criminals or the hostages. Emma's cup clattered against the saucer, coffee spilling onto the table. Isaac reached for her hand as the color drained from her face. 7 people, she whispered. In a wagon, traveling in December, the marshal leaned forward, his interest sharp. You know something about this, madam? Emma looked at Isaac, fear and confusion warring in her expression. I remember a wagon. I remember being so cold and so afraid. There were others with me, but I couldn't see their faces. We kept moving day after day, and I didn't know why or where we were going. The marshal's expression grew grave. Madam, I need to ask you some questions. Can you describe any of the men? Did you hear any names? But Emma couldn't. The memories were fragmentary, inconsistent, like trying to hold onto water. She remembered fear, cold, the creak of wagon wheels, but nothing concrete enough to help the marshal. The criminals were last seen heading into Nebraska, the marshal said. My guess is they let the hostages go somewhere along the way, probably when they didn't need them anymore. You're lucky your husband found you when he did, madam. The others might not have been so fortunate. After the marshal left, promising to send word if he learned anything more, Emma collapsed into Isaac's arms, shaking. What if I could have told him something useful? What if the others died because I can't remember? This isn't your fault, Isaac said firmly. You didn't ask to be taken hostage. You didn't ask to lose your memory. You survived, Emma. You survived, and now you're here and you're safe. But where did I come from originally? Emma asked, the question that had haunted her since she woke. The marshal said they took people from a town in Colorado. Was I living there? Do I have family there who think I'm dead? We'll find out, Isaac promised. When the ranch work slows down in a few weeks, we'll travel to Colorado. We'll go to the town where it happened and ask questions. Someone might remember you. They made the journey in June, traveling by train from Salina to Denver, and then by stage to the small mining town of Silver Peak, where the robbery had occurred. It was a rough place, still raw with the chaos of the silver boom, but the people were willing enough to talk about the robbery that had shaken their community. Emma and Isaac visited the sheriff's office first, where a tired-looking lawman named Curtis pulled out a file with notes from the incident. 7 people taken, he confirmed. We got names for 6 of them, but one was a stranger who just arrived in town that day. Young woman, probably in her 20s, brown hair, green eyes. That fit you. Emma nodded, her hand tight in Isaac's. Did anyone here know her? Know where she came from? Sheriff Curtis shook his head. She'd stepped off the stage that morning, said she was meeting someone but didn't say who. She was standing outside the hotel when the robbery happened. Just wrong place, wrong time. The bank customers and employees, we knew them. But her, she was a mystery then and remains one now. They asked around town, showing Emma's face to everyone they could find, but no one recognized her as anything other than the unnamed hostage from the robbery. Whoever she'd been meeting in Silver Peak had never come forward, and the stage records showed only that she'd boarded in Santa Fe, New Mexico, paying cash for the ticket. Santa Fe, Emma said as they sat in the hotel room that night. Why was I going to Santa Fe? Or coming from there? How far back does this mystery go? Isaac pulled her close, feeling her frustration and fear. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you were starting a new life, leaving your past behind deliberately. Maybe losing your memory was just the final step in that journey. That's a nice thought, Emma said. But it doesn't feel true. When I try to remember, there's pain. Not physical pain, but emotional pain. Something bad happened to me before all this. I can feel it, even if I can't remember it. They returned to Kansas with more questions than answers, but also with a strange sense of closure. Emma had been a stranger to Silver Peak, probably traveling through or running from something. Whatever life she'd had before was gone, lost not just to memory, but to the simple fact that no one was looking for her. If she'd had family who cared, they would have made inquiries after the robbery. The absence of anyone searching spoke volumes. Summer on the ranch was busy and hot, but Emma threw herself into the work with determination. She started a vegetable garden, the first real garden the ranch had seen since Isaac's mother died. She befriended the ranch's small collection of chickens, naming each one despite Isaac's protests that they were livestock, not pets. She made the house beautiful, filling it with small touches that transformed it from a bachelor's sparse quarters into a real home. And gradually, as the days turned into weeks and then months, Emma stopped looking over her shoulder. The tension that had lived in her shoulders since she woke began to ease. She laughed more, smiled more, seemed to settle into her life as Emma Turner, Isaac Whitmore's wife, rather than as someone temporarily occupying that role until her real identity was discovered. In August, Emma told Isaac she was pregnant. They were sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and red, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There's a baby," she said simply. "Our baby." Isaac felt tears prick his eyes, something that would have embarrassed him before but now felt entirely appropriate. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I've missed my monthly courses twice now, and I've been sick every morning for a week." She turned to him, her own eyes shining. "We're going to be parents, Isaac." He kissed her then, pouring every ounce of love and joy he felt into that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, he kept his hand on her stomach, imagining the life growing there. "I was so alone before you came," he said. "And now look at us, a family." "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't found me?" Emma asked. "If you'd turned back before you reached those cottonwood trees, if the snow had covered me completely?" "I try not to," Isaac admitted. "But sometimes when I wake in the night and see you sleeping beside me, I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever had you. It terrifies me." Emma squeezed his hand. "We found each other, Isaac. Against all odds, in the middle of a blizzard, in the middle of nowhere, we found each other. That has to mean something." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Emma dealt with persistent morning sickness through the first few months. She remained active, insisting on keeping up with her household tasks despite Isaac's attempts to make her rest more. They prepared the spare bedroom as a nursery, and Isaac built a cradle from cottonwood, the same trees that had grown near where he'd found Emma. In October, Emma's memories came flooding back in a torrent that left her gasping and crying. Isaac held her as she remembered, finally, everything. Her name was Emma Taylor, and she'd grown up in a small town in Missouri. She'd married young, at 17, to a man named Robert who'd seemed charming at first, but revealed himself to be cruel and violent once they were wed. For 3 years, she'd endured abuse that left scars on her body and her soul. When Robert announced they were moving to Colorado for better opportunities, Emma had seen her chance. She'd been planning her escape for months, secretly saving money, writing to a friend from childhood who'd moved to Santa Fe and promised to help her start over. The journey had been terrifying, every moment fearing Robert would find her. She'd reached Santa Fe safely and spent 2 weeks with her friend, preparing to file for divorce and start a new life. But Robert had found her. Her friend's husband, thinking he was doing the right thing, had written to Robert telling him where Emma was. Robert had come on the next train, and Emma had fled again, this time to Colorado, hoping to lose herself in the chaos of the mining towns. She'd been in Silver Peak for less than 4 hours when the robbery happened. "I remember being in the wagon," Emma said, her voice shaking. "The criminals kept arguing about what to do with us. They knew they couldn't keep us forever, but they were afraid we'd identify them if they let us go. I remember thinking I was going to die, and then I don't remember anything else until I woke up in your house." Isaac held her tighter, rage and sorrow churning in his gut. "This Robert, is he still out there?" "I don't know," Emma whispered. "I don't know if he's looking for me or if he's given up. I don't know if he thinks I'm dead or if he's still searching." "You're Emma Turner now," Isaac said firmly. "You're my wife carrying my child. If this man comes here, he'll have to go through me." Emma looked up at him, fear and determination mingling in her eyes. "I should have told you. If I'd remembered sooner, I should have said something. You're telling me now, that's what matters." Isaac cupped her face gently. "Emma, listen to me. You survived something terrible, and then you survived something else terrible, and you came through it all to be here with me. You're the strongest person I know. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." But nothing came. November turned to December, marking a full year since Isaac had found Emma in the snow, and there was no sign of Robert Taylor. Isaac made quiet inquiries through the marshal's office, learning that Robert had returned to Missouri after Emma disappeared, telling people his wife had run off with another man. He'd been seen in town as recently as October, apparently having moved on with his life, showing no signs of continued searching. "He's given up," Emma said when Isaac shared this news. "Or he never really cared to begin with. Maybe he's even relieved to be rid of me." "His loss is my gain," Isaac said, his hand on her swollen belly. The baby would come soon, the doctor from Salina had said during his last visit. Any day now. Emma went into labor on a cold December morning, exactly 1 year and 2 days after Isaac had found her. The labor was long and difficult, and Isaac spent most of it pacing the kitchen while the doctor and a midwife from town attended Emma upstairs. Her screams tore through him, making him feel helpless and terrified in a way that facing down a winter storm never had. But when the crying of a newborn finally rang through the house, followed by the midwife calling down that both mother and baby were healthy, Isaac's legs nearly gave out with relief. He climbed the stairs on shaking legs, entering the bedroom to find Emma exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle in her arms. "It's a boy," she said, her voice hoarse but happy. "We have a son." Isaac approached slowly, almost afraid to disturb the perfection of the moment. Emma pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. The baby's eyes were closed, his tiny fists waving in the air. "He's perfect," Isaac breathed. "You're both perfect." They named him James, after Isaac's father, with the middle name Thomas after the reverend who'd married them. Little James Turner Whitmore entered the world with a set of lungs that suggested he'd have no problem making his needs known, and he quickly became the center of their lives. Emma took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She was fiercely protective of James, watching over him constantly those first few weeks. Isaac often woke in the night to find her standing by the cradle, just watching their son sleep. "I'm afraid he'll disappear," she admitted one night when Isaac asked about it. "I'm afraid I'll wake up and this will all have been a dream. My happy ending feels too good to be true." "It's real," Isaac assured her. "We're real. This family is real. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Spring came again, bringing with it new life and new growth. The ranch was thriving, the herd expanded with several new calves. Emma's garden came back even better than before, providing fresh vegetables throughout the summer. James grew from a helpless newborn into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everything and everyone. In May, nearly 18 months after Isaac had found Emma in the snow, a letter arrived from the marshal's office. Robert Taylor had died in Missouri, killed in a bar fight over a card game. There were no other relatives asking after Emma, no one contesting her presumed death. Legally, effectively, Emma Taylor ceased to exist, leaving only Emma Turner, rancher's wife and mother. Emma cried when she read the letter, though she couldn't entirely say why. She hadn't loved Robert, had been terrified of him, but there was something final about his death that made her past feel truly gone. "I'm free," she said to Isaac that night after James was asleep. "Completely free. For the first time since I was 17 years old, I don't have to be afraid." "You were always free," Isaac said. "From the moment you woke up in this house, you were free, but I'm glad you feel it now too." They made love that night with a passion and joy that had been building through months of caution and fear. Emma came to him without shadows, without the weight of her past hanging over her. She was simply herself, completely and utterly herself, and Isaac loved her more than he'd thought it possible to love another person. The years rolled by in the way of happy lives, marked more by small joys than great dramas. James grew into a serious little boy who loved horses and wanted to be just like his father. Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Grace when James was 3, and then another boy named Samuel 2 years after that. The ranch expanded steadily. Isaac hired help, a young man named Peter who'd come west looking for work and proved reliable and hardworking. Emma's garden grew into something substantial, producing enough that they could sell surplus at the market in Salina. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Emma never recovered all of her memories. There were still gaps, blank spaces where her mind had protected itself by forgetting, but she found she didn't mind anymore. The woman she'd been before, Emma Taylor, who'd suffered in silence and feared for her life, was gone. Emma Turner had taken her place, and Emma Turner was strong and loved and free. On Christmas Eve of 1886, 8 years after Isaac had found Emma in the snow, they gathered their children around the fireplace for the annual tradition of remembering. James was 7 now, Grace was 4, and Samuel was a toddler of 2, more interested in the decorations than the story. 8 years ago today, Isaac began, I rode out into a snowstorm looking for lost cattle. I was ready to turn back, ready to give up, when I saw something that changed my life forever. You found Mama, James said, having heard this story every Christmas since he was old enough to understand. I found Mama, Isaac confirmed, smiling at Emma across the room. She was lying in the snow, more frozen than not, and I thought I might be too late. But you weren't, Grace chimed in, her voice certain. You saved her. We saved each other, Emma corrected gently. I was lost in more ways than one, and your father found me and brought me home. And then I found out that home wasn't a place, it was him. It was the family we've built together. James frowned thoughtfully. But you didn't remember anything when you woke up. Weren't you scared? Terrified, Emma admitted. But I looked at your father and somehow I knew I was safe. And the first thing I told him, once I could think clearly, was that I'd never leave him. And you didn't, James said, satisfied with this confirmation of the story's happy ending. And I didn't, Emma agreed, meeting Isaac's eyes across the room. And I never will. Later, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Isaac and Emma stood on the porch looking out at the snow-covered prairie. It wasn't storming tonight, just a gentle fall of flakes that caught the moonlight and made everything glow. You ever miss not knowing? Isaac asked. Back before you remembered everything, when you could just be Emma without all the weight of the past. Emma considered this, then shook her head. No. Remembering was hard but necessary. I needed to know what I'd survived to really appreciate what we have now. Besides, the past made me who I am. I wouldn't change that even if I could. I never told you what I was thinking that day, Isaac said. When I found you, I remember looking down at you, this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere in the middle of a blizzard, and my first thought after she's alive was don't let her be alone. Not because I wanted company, but because I knew what it felt like to be alone, and I didn't want that for anyone else. Emma slipped her arm around his waist, leaning into his warmth. We're not alone anymore. We have 3 beautiful children, a home we built together, a life we built together. We have everything. We have everything, Isaac agreed, pulling her close. They stood there for a long time, 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds, watching the snow fall over the land they'd made their own. Behind them, the house glowed with warmth and light. Inside, their children slept safe and sound. Around them, the ranch stood solid against the winter, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. Emma Turner had been lost in more ways than one when Isaac Whitmore found her collapsed in the snow. She'd lost her memory, lost her way, lost hope of ever being truly free. But in losing everything, she'd found something better. She'd found love, found family, found home, and she'd kept her promise. She'd never left him. The years continued to unfold like pages in a book, each one bringing new chapters to their story. James grew tall and strong, helping his father with the ranch work from the time he was 10. Grace inherited her mother's way with the garden and her father's love of horses, becoming an accomplished rider who could outpace most of the ranch hands by the time she was 12. Samuel, the baby who'd grown into a boy with his mother's green eyes and quick smile, had a way with animals that suggested he'd make a fine rancher himself one day. Emma and Isaac grew older together, their love deepening rather than fading with time. They'd weathered difficult seasons, years when the cattle market dropped or drought threatened the herd, but they'd weathered them together. The loneliness that had characterized Isaac's life before Emma was a distant memory. so far removed from his present reality that he sometimes struggled to remember what it had felt like. In 1892, when James was 13, a wagon train passing through stopped at the ranch to water their horses and purchase supplies. Among the travelers was an elderly woman who looked at Emma with startled recognition. "Emma, Emma Taylor, I thought you were dead." Emma's hand tightened on the jar of preserves she'd been wrapping for sale. "You knew me, knew you? Child, I was your mother's sister. I'm your Aunt Margaret." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "We heard you'd disappeared in Colorado, that you'd probably died in that terrible business with the bank robbers. Your mother grieved herself sick. She passed 2 years ago, never knowing what really happened to you." Emma felt the world tilt around her. An aunt she couldn't remember, a mother she couldn't recall, a whole family she'd lost twice over. Isaac appeared at her side, his hand steady on her back. "I lost my memory," Emma explained quietly. "I didn't remember my name, my family, anything. By the time it came back, I'd already started a new life." Margaret looked between Emma and Isaac, taking in their obvious connection, the children visible through the house's open door. "And you're happy. You've built a good life, the best life," Emma said with certainty. "I won't lie and say I'm not sad to hear about my mother, or that I don't wish things could have been different. But I'm happy, Aunt Margaret, happier than I ever was before." Margaret stayed for dinner, sharing stories about Emma's childhood that Emma only vaguely remembered. There'd been a younger brother, Thomas, who joined the army and was stationed in Arizona. Emma's father had died when she was young, leaving her mother to raise the children alone. They'd lived in poverty, which was why Emma had married Robert when he'd promised her security and comfort. "Your mother always regretted encouraging that match," Margaret said. "She saw the bruises, even though you tried to hide them. She died wishing she'd helped you leave him instead of telling you that marriage meant enduring whatever came." "She couldn't have known," Emma said. "And if I hadn't married Robert, I wouldn't have run, and if I hadn't run, I wouldn't have been in Colorado, and if I hadn't been in Colorado, I wouldn't be here now. Everything that happened, as painful as it was, led me to exactly where I needed to be." When Margaret's wagon train departed the next morning, she left with promises to write, and to let Emma's brother Thomas know she was alive and well. Emma watched them go with mixed feelings, grateful for the connection to her past, but more grateful that it was indeed her past and not her present. "Do you regret not going with her?" Isaac asked as the wagon disappeared from view. "She offered to help you find your brother." Emma turned to him, taking his rough, calloused hand in hers. "I already found my family, Isaac. You and our children are my family. The past is interesting to know about, but it's not where I live anymore." Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. They added a new barn in 1893, built strong and tall enough to weather any storm. Isaac taught James how to manage the books, preparing him to eventually take over the ranch. Grace showed an unexpected talent for healing, nursing injured animals back to health, with skill that impressed even the veterinarian from town. Samuel, at 10 years old, could ride anything with 4 legs and wasn't afraid of hard work. Emma became known in Salina as someone who could help with difficult situations. Women who were trapped in circumstances similar to what she'd endured began finding their way to her door, and she never turned any away. She helped several women escape dangerous situations, providing them with money, transport, and connections to start new lives. Isaac supported this work without question, understanding that Emma was giving others the chance she'd had to create something better. In 1895, news came that the bank robbers who'd taken Emma and the other hostages had finally been caught. They'd been operating across multiple territories for years, but a shootout in Wyoming had ended with 3 of them dead and 2 captured. The captured men confessed to dozens of crimes, including the Silver Peak robbery. During their confession, they revealed what had happened to the hostages. They'd planned to kill them all, but when one of the group objected to murdering innocents, they'd argued. In the chaos of their disagreement, Emma had managed to slip away in the night. The other hostages had been released near the Nebraska border, warned not to speak to the law for a full week or face consequences. "They said you just vanished into a snowstorm," the marshal wrote in his letter. "They figured you'd die of exposure, which made you no longer their problem. The fact that you survived that night in that weather is nothing short of miraculous." Emma read the letter aloud to Isaac that evening, then carefully folded it and placed it in the box where she kept important papers. "Miraculous," she repeated. "I suppose it was, or maybe it was just luck, or maybe it was meant to be." "Does it matter which?" Isaac asked. Emma smiled. "No, I suppose it doesn't. The ending is the same either way." The children grew into young adults, each carving their own path while remaining tied to the ranch and the family. James married a girl from Salina in 1898, a school teacher named Alice who fit into the family as though she'd always been there. They built a house on the ranch property, and James took over more and more of the daily operations as Isaac's back began to trouble him after years of hard work. Grace announced in 1899 that she wanted to study medicine, a bold ambition for a woman in that time. Emma and Isaac sold several head of cattle to pay for her education, sending their daughter off to a women's medical college in Philadelphia with their blessing and support. She returned 3 years later as doctor. Grace Whitmore, opening a practice in Salina that served everyone from ranchers to townspeople to the Native Americans from the nearby reservation, who'd been underserved by the territory's other doctors. Samuel, more wedded to the land than either of his siblings, took over the day-to-day running of the ranch in 1903 when he was 20. He married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county, and together they worked to modernize the operation while maintaining the values of hard work and fair dealing that Isaac and Emma had instilled. Isaac and Emma, both in their 50s now, stepped back from the hardest physical labor but remained vital parts of the ranch's operation. Emma's garden had become something of a legend in the area, and she published a small book of gardening advice specifically for the Kansas climate that sold well throughout the territory. Isaac served on the local council, helping to mediate disputes and plan for the community's future. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904 with all 3 children present, along with James's 3 children, Grace's husband who she'd met at medical school, and Samuel's pregnant wife. The house was full of laughter and love, so different from the lonely, silent place it had been when Isaac lived there alone. During a quiet moment in the celebration, Emma found Isaac sitting on the porch, looking out over the land they'd built together, thinking deep thoughts. She asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Thinking about how different things might have been," Isaac admitted. "If that storm had come a day earlier or later, if I'd turned back 10 minutes sooner, if I'd ridden in a different direction. There were so many ways I might have missed you entirely." "But you didn't miss me," Emma said. "Against all the odds, through all the possible ways it could have gone wrong, you found me, and I found you, and we built this." She gestured toward the house, toward the sounds of their family celebrating inside. "All of this, Isaac. We built all of this together. Best thing I ever did was refuse to turn back that day," Isaac said. "Best decision I ever made." "The best decision I ever made was waking up and deciding to live," Emma countered. "I could have given up. Part of me wanted to give up, but I opened my eyes and there you were, and something in me decided that was worth fighting for." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the sun set over the prairie. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and well-maintained. Their children's voices drifted from inside, mingling with the voices of grandchildren and spouses. The life they'd built together stood solid and real, a testament to chance and choice, to love found and love built through years of shared work and shared joy. In 1908, Emma's brother Thomas came to visit, the connection re-established through years of letters after Aunt Margaret had found Emma. He was a career military man, stiff and formal at first, but he relaxed as he saw how happy his sister was. Before he left, he pulled Isaac aside. "I spent years angry at her for disappearing," Thomas said. "Angry that she didn't contact us, didn't let us know she was alive. But seeing her here, seeing what she's built with you, I understand. Sometimes you have to leave everything behind to find where you really belong." Isaac clasped the other man's shoulder. "She belongs here. She always did. It just took us both a while to find each other." The years moved steadily onward. Isaac's hair turned gray, then white. Emma's face gained lines, each one a story of laughter or worry or joy. They became grandparents many times over, their house a gathering place for a sprawling family that grew larger with each passing year. In 1912, on a cold December night, Isaac and Emma sat before the fire as they did most evenings. Isaac's back ached despite the cushions Emma had arranged for him, and Emma's hands were stiff with the arthritis that had crept in over recent years. But they were together as they'd been for 30 years. "Remember what you said to me?" Isaac asked suddenly. "That first week when you wanted to leave to look for your family," Emma smiled. "I said a lot of things that week. You said you'd never leave me without saying goodbye. You promised me that, and I've kept that promise," Emma said. "I've been right here, right beside you for 30 years. 33, counting the years before we married," Isaac corrected. 33 years since I found you in the snow." Emma left her chair to settle beside him on the sofa, fitting herself against his side the way she had thousands of times before. "The best 33 years of my life." "Mine too," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Mine too." They passed quietly into sleep like that, comfortable and warm. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful together. When Samuel checked on them in the morning, he found them still sitting together, Isaac's arm around Emma, her head on his shoulder, both wearing expressions of perfect peace. The doctor said their hearts had simply stopped together, worn out from years of hard work and full living. But the family knew better. Isaac and Emma had lived as one for so long that death couldn't separate them any more than life had. They were buried on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a stone that bore both their names and a simple inscription: "Found in the snow, bound by love, together forever." The funeral drew people from 3 counties, a testament to the lives they'd lived and the impact they'd made. James took over the ranch completely, running it according to the principles his parents had taught him. Grace continued her medical practice, known throughout Kansas for her skill and compassion. Samuel expanded the ranch holdings, but never forgot the values of hard work and fair dealing that Isaac had instilled. The grandchildren grew up hearing stories about their grandparents, about the grandfather who'd rescued a woman from a snowstorm, and the grandmother who'd woken with no memory but full of determination. They heard about how love could be found in the most unlikely places, how family could be built rather than just inherited, how 2 people could take nothing and build everything. The ranch continued for generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story, but never forgetting the foundation. In the house, carefully preserved, was the cradle Isaac had built from cottonwood, the same trees that had grown near where he'd found Emma. It became tradition for each new baby in the family to sleep in that cradle, connecting them to the story of their family's beginning. And every December, the family gathered at the ranch for what they called Remembrance Day, the anniversary of the day Isaac had found Emma in the snow. They told the story again, making sure each new generation knew where they'd come from, knew the power of chance and choice, of love and determination, of promises kept and families built. The story of Isaac and Emma became part of the fabric of Kansas history, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But to those who'd known them, who'd seen them working side by side in the garden or sitting together on the porch watching the sunset, it was simply the story of two people who'd found each other when both needed finding, who'd built a life together from nothing but love and determination. The ranch stood for over 100 years, finally becoming a historical site in the 1980s. Visitors came to see the house where Emma had woken with no memory, the barn Isaac had built with his own hands, the hillside where they were buried side by side. They came to hear the story, to feel the echo of a love so strong it had survived storms, lost memories, dangerous pasts, and all the challenges that time could throw at it. And on winter nights, when snow fell soft and white over the Kansas prairie, visitors sometimes reported seeing two figures standing on the porch of the old house, hand in hand, looking out over the land they'd loved. The Historical Society dismissed these sightings as tricks of the light or romantic imagination, but those who'd known the real Isaac and Emma weren't so sure. Love like theirs, they said, didn't end with death. Love like theirs was eternal, bound into the land they'd worked, the house they'd built, the family they'd raised. Isaac had found Emma in the snow. Emma had promised she'd never leave him, and both had kept their word in ways that transcended mortality. The cottonwood trees still grew near the creek, their branches reaching toward the sky, marking the spot where one man's refusal to turn back had changed two lives forever. And beneath those trees, on clear winter nights, the snow sometimes fell in patterns that looked almost like two figures dancing, celebrating the miracle of having found each other against all odds, celebrating the life they'd built together, celebrating the love that had started with a desperate rescue and grown into something legendary. It was, everyone agreed, the greatest love story the Kansas prairie had ever known. Not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it was real. Two ordinary people, finding extraordinary love in the most unexpected place, building a life together one day at a time, keeping promises and keeping faith, refusing to let the past define them while honoring what had brought them together. And if that wasn't the very definition of a happy ending, nothing was.